In this runbook, I'm going to be demonstrating a potential approach to managing Azure Active Directory users, groups, and role-based access control by implementing several different tools such as Terraform, GitHub Actions workflows, AZCLI, Python scripts, and some steps in the Azure portal user interface. Some of the topics that will be covered with this implementation include identity governance of users and groups using dynamic membership, role-based access control based on group assignment using both built-in and custom roles, role-based access control assignment scoped to dynamic Azure AD groups, and a conditional access policy enforcing multi-factor authentication based on dynamic group assignment, as well as an Azure Service Principal that will be used to provision our Terraform configuration through the GitHub Actions workflow. And finally, an Azure Active Directory self-service password reset feature will be enabled for all of our users at the end of the demonstration. This runbook here will be linked in the description of the YouTube video, where it'll outline all of the information you see here, including prerequisites, which I won't really be going over, but you can take a look. One I do want to highlight is that in order to configure the conditional access policy, multi-factor authentication within the policy, as well as dynamic group membership, it does require that you have the Azure AD Premium P1 or P2 license, which you can get a free trial of in your activated Azure AD tenant for a limited use time. Additionally, in this runbook here, you'll see I have a design artifacts section, which includes a link to the GitHub repository that I'll be working out of here. So you can certainly reference that as you build out your own architecture. But just please note that there will be a few items that you'll have to customize for your own environment, such as like the principal name for your users is going to have a different default domain name than mine, since I'll be using jennasrunbooks.com. So let's go ahead and talk about the diagram here. Our Terraform code developer, who is going to be developing the Terraform code for the Azure AD provider as well as the Azure RM provider. And that's where the RBAC details will sit under the Azure RM provider. So just keep that in mind as you're working through the configuration. There is a difference between AD as well as RM in your Azure providers with Terraform. Once we get the code configured on our local machine, we'll push a branch out to our GitHub repository. And based on every commit, that's going to kick off a GitHub Actions workflow, which is going to automatically run through your code changes and output results from a Terraform format, init, validate, and plan. And that's going to use the Azure Service Principal that we're going to configure for this. That gets set up inside of Azure as an app registration here, and we're using the name GH Actions Runbooks AD. So that is authenticated to Azure to be allowed to run all of these validations for us. You'll note here that I've got a green line that authenticates the SPN into Active Directory, and also it goes out to the subscriptions here. And that's because we're going to be setting up this Service Principal as an owner of all of those subscriptions and everything beneath it in RBAC, so that it has the privileges to assign RBAC roles for all of our Azure AD users and assigning their IAM roles to all of the resources and resource groups beneath the subscriptions. Over here, we've got our ART users. So that's going to be a department that gets assigned to some of our users, which dynamically assigns any users with the ART department to the Azure Active Directory ART group. Anyone in this particular group is going to have a conditional access policy assigned that enforces multi-factor authentication to access any of the resources in Azure. So any of the applications, which includes the portal itself, or any applications that might be created within Azure. And that's going to force our users to authenticate, whether they choose to do so through a text message or the Microsoft Authentication app. And finally, the last step that we'll be implementing is the self-service password reset feature, and we'll be enabling it on all of our Azure Active Directory users. And we'll be doing some demos of login, displaying login access for our different users in the different groups to show what they have privileges to and what they don't. So that's our architecture. Let's go ahead and get into our demonstration here. So going down to the procedure, I've already done this. So first step you need to do is authenticate into Azure and using your local shell so that you can run a Terraform apply locally. And just a note on that, I've got the GitHub Actions workflow set up to run everything up to through a plan. I don't have it configured to run an apply, although you can certainly do so. I just prefer to have a little bit more control on running the apply. But this allows you to run that apply locally once you're logged in, and to also run some of the Python scripts that we'll be touching on later here. So the next step here, which I've also already done, is to create the Azure SPN and assigning it that role of owner at the subscription level so that it can manage all of the resources and also assign the roles to other Azure AD users for those resources. So here's a quick little script on how to do that. You'll just want to update your subscription ID here to your particular subscription. And then that's going to actually output the JSON output here, which you're going to use to configure your GitHub secrets so that the workflow is able to authenticate that service principal into Azure. And I'll just flip over to GitHub really quick to show that. Okay, so here's our Azure security repository where I've got this, all of our files here for the Terraform artifacts. So you just want to go over to your settings section, secrets, actions, and then go ahead and configure the your secrets here as defined in the runbook. All right, and then we're on to step 4 here. So we want to also assign the Azure AD role of user administrator to our service principal. And just noting here that the Azure CLI is unsupported for this action as of this writing. And I also had some errors when I was trying to do this through PowerShell commandlets, which are still in preview mode. So I'm not sure if I was making a mistake there or what, but we'll go ahead and I'll just show you where to do this in the Azure portal. All right, so you want to go to your Azure Active Directory blade, which we're in here, and then you need to go over to the Roles and Administrators section. And then you just need to search for the role that you need. For us, it's User Administrator. Select the role, and then you'll add an assignment. And you can see here I've already got our GitHub Actions Runbook Service Principal assigned to that role. So the next step we're also going to do from the portal, and this is to assign API permissions to the service principal, and this is going to allow read-write access to our conditional policy. If you don't configure these settings, your Terraform plan is going to fail. It's expecting you to have permission to authenticate as a signed-in user, and these API permissions allow you to do that. So we'll flip back over to the portal and get that. Well, I've already got it configured, but I'll just show you where to do so. So we want to go to our app registrations to locate our service principal. And it's right here. Select it. Go to API permissions. And you can see I've got all of my permissions required per the screenshot in the runbook. So you just want to go ahead and click Add Permission and locate each of these for the application type. And then once you've got them all added in here, it will require admin consent. So you want to go ahead and make sure you select Grant Admin Consent for the default directory for each of these new API permissions. All right, and we'll just stay in the portal here because the next step is actually, step 6 is to disable security defaults. in order for you to be able to create the conditional access policy. And again, I've already done this, but I'll go ahead and show you where that's located. So actually we can just scroll horizontally. Oh, go back. Go over to Azure Active Directory Blade and go to Properties, Manage Security Defaults, and toggle Enable Security Defaults to No. I've already got it toggled, and then you'll want to hit Save. All right, so on to step 7 here. We're going to go ahead and create our first user. And so we'll want to make sure that we've cloned the repository, or that you've set up your own repository in GitHub. And we're going to run the Python script here to create a new user, which is going to output our Terraform syntax based on the user input values we provide. So I've already created my new example user, Ray Brown, and I've created a new branch for this commit as well, but I'll go ahead and just run through the Python script real quick and we can talk about it here. So what this is going to do is it's going to reach out to your current Azure tenant and grab the default domain name and assign it this variable. And then it's going to basically use all of these other Terraform values to create your new Azure AD user. So we'll just like run this really quick. Python scripts create, and we'll just do Ray Brown again. And first step is the principal name, and you can see here it grabbed my default domain name for the principal. And then we'll put Ray Brown and art as well. And then you can just grab this output here to paste into your main.tf file, which is where I've been putting all of my Azure AD users and Azure AD groups. So you can see I've already got Roy here. He's going to be added to our engineering department. And then we've got Bob Ross. He's in the art department. And then we've got Ray Brown, who's also going to be in the art department. We've got groups configured here, one for readers, which will show how these groups get their roles assigned to them in the next file here. The dynamic membership for these groups is based on the default domain of the user principal name. So everybody that has Jenna's runbooks within their principal name is going to be automatically added to this readers group. So that's all of these users so far. Then we've got our engineering group. Again, dynamic membership. So anybody with the Department of Engineering will be added to the engineering group. So right now that's only going to be Roy. And then we've got our art group, which is also a dynamic membership based on user department having art configured into it. So we're going to have Bob and Roy added to those. So going over to our access file, this is where we're going to have our custom role definition. So that's something I created here was a custom role definition to allow our engineering group, and that's the assignment is right here based on the principal ID, to allow anyone in the engineering group to be able to view the storage account keys or generate keys in both the storage account and the blobs for our Terraform state files, which is being saved remotely in this resource group out here. So this is a custom role definition, and I've specified the permissions that it's allowed to do, and then it gets assigned to the engineering Azure AD group. So there's the assignment, and then here's the scope. So it's only allowed at this level, at the resource group and storage account level specific to the Terraform state files. And this is just to demonstrate that, which we'll show by logging in as Roy later on in this demo. Here we've got the built-in role assignments. We've got a reader role all. So this is just the reader role scoped at the subscription level. So that means that any, if you recall, all of our users are going to be added to our readers group, and all of them will be allowed to read the subscription level and below resources, except for private data like these keys. So we'll demonstrate that as well. And then we've got a contributor role assigned to our art group, which allows them to create any resources under this resource group that we'll create called art group, which gets created here. And that is going to be assigned to all of our art users. And then finally, we've got our Azure Active Directory conditional access policy. I called it the art policy because we are just going to enable this for all of our users in the Azure AD group art. So anybody in the art group or the art department, which gets assigned to the art group, will have multi-factor authentication enforcement assigned to their login on all applications. All applications here related to Azure. So that includes the Azure portal or any other Azure application. They're going to be forced to use multi-factor authentication to log in. Okay, so I've already pushed out my commit for adding Ray Brown to a new pull request in GitHub. So let's go ahead and just flip over there to take a look at our GitHub Actions workflow output. All right, so we're back in our Azure Security repository, and we've got a pull request here for Ray Brown. And this GitHub Actions workflow is going to run on both directories I've got set up, so we can just ignore this one. This Azure Dev Infra is where I've got my state files configured, my infrastructure for that. And I'm probably going to be using this for like other demos related to Azure Security, so we can just ignore that. Our focus here is on this particular one where we configured Ray Brown. We can see that all of our checks were successful. So the formatting was good. It was able to initialize using that service principal name. The code was validated. And then our plan was successful. And then we can just toggle this caret here and take a look at our Terraform plan results. And because I didn't have any of this deployed, I had run a Terraform destroy, so I didn't have any of the users or groups created. It's actually going to create everything in our root module, our Terraform root module here. So we've got our art group, our access policy, everything that we've gone over kind of is going to be created here. So you can go ahead and review that and ensure that it looks good as expected. We're going to be adding 12 different resources or objects, nothing to change, nothing to destroy. So we're pretty confident that we can go ahead and move forward with merging this pull request. And you could have your team review this and know that the code is good, and then you can go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're just going to run our Terraform apply from within our local shell here. So I'm good with this already. I'm going to go ahead and just do it from my branch, and I'll pause it while this gets loaded. Okay, and our Terraform apply results have finished, and it's pretty much giving us the same results as the Terraform plan. So we've got 12 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. You can go ahead and review that, make sure you're good with that, and then we'll go ahead and hit yes. And I'll pause the video again while these resources create. Okay, so the Terraform apply has completed. All of our resources have now been built. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Azure portal, at all of the newly created users. Which we can see here. And just taking a look on the filter for all of our jennasrunbooks.com principal users, we can see we've got Bob Ross. He's been created under the art department, as well as Ray Brown. And we've got Roy Treneman in our engineering department here. So let's go ahead and check out our groups to see how the dynamic membership worked. So we've got the art group created here, and we can see the members for Bob and Ray. And same thing for engineering. We've got Roy, and then we can take a look at our readers group, which is going to contain everybody in the tenant. So even these test users I created and in my admin account here, we're all able to have read access to everything under the subscription. The other item we can take a look at is our conditional access policy. So scrolling back over to our AD blade here, we can go to security and conditional access. And here we've got our art policy. So clicking on that, we can see the art group was assigned to this policy, and it's going to enforce it on all apps, which you can take a look at here. If you wanted to check out which select apps you could, custom apply rather than everything. And then I didn't assign any conditions, but you can certainly do that. And then it's going to enforce multi-factor authentication when logging into anything like the portal, which we'll test out shortly here with one of our users. So I'm going to exit out of here and unsave. So why don't we test out logging in as Roy, one of the members, well, our only member of the engineering department, and just take a look at what kind of privileges he has inside of the portal here. So we'll sign in with a different account, and I've already got Roy under here, so we'll go ahead and just select that and use his super secret initial password. Now he does not have the conditional access policy, so he's not going to be prompted for multi-factor authentication. We'll do that next. And I have to give him another super secret password that's enforced upon logging in. So we've done that and validated it by entering it twice. All right, so I'm just logging into the portal as Roy here, member of the engineering group. Let's go home, and you can see that he's able to view the subscription there. Let's see, we can go to all resources, and you can see he can see the runbook Terraform state file is stored in the storage account here. And remember, we configured that custom policy, that custom role where anybody in the engineering group is able to view the keys for the storage account containing our Terraform state files. So let's go ahead and see if that actually worked. And it did. And I'm not going to hit show, but we'll log in as Bob, a member of the art group, and see if he can even access this page. Which he shouldn't be able to because he's not in the engineering group, but we can access the storage accounts keys, and then we can also go into the containers where the Terraform state files are here in the blob container, and we can take a look at we can generate SAS tokens, and we can take a look at all of the information here. And I don't believe Bob will be able to see this, but we'll test that out as well. And then what else can Roy see? Let's see here. Can he see the art group that was created? So let's go to the resource groups, and sure enough, we can see that the art group is there. Since we have reader access, we do have the ability to see all of the resource groups under this subscription, because we're in this readers group, which is set at the subscription level. You can view all resources, but you can't make any changes. So quick way to validate that is by going to the resource group or specific resource itself, checking out access control IAM here, and taking a look at the role assignments. And if you know what group you're in, you can check that here. But you can also select check access, and you can say view my access and see that you're under the reader role right there. Okay, so next let's test out Bob's access here. So we'll go ahead and flip over to Bob. Oh, and I don't know if that's going to work. Okay, let's try this again, logging in as Bob. And we do get the prompt for his initial password, which does require the reset. But because he's in that ARC group, which is associated with the conditional access policy, it's going to give us this notification that more info is required. And we just want to hit next. And I am going to use the Microsoft Authenticator app for this. So we'll go ahead and just follow the prompts here with the Microsoft Authenticator app. Hit next. Set up your account. I've already got it set up for Bob, and I'm just going to scan this QR code and hit next. And then I get prompted on my phone to approve Bob's access. So I hit approve. And next. And we're done. That's it. We've authenticated. And now we need to reset our password. So we want to hit that super secret, and then we want to put in a new super secret password. And there you go. We validated that the conditional access policy is working on our ART Azure AD group members. Take a look at that later. Okay, so let's see what Bob has access to view. So let's see all resources. This is the only resource that we have. He does have access to see that it exists because, again, he's in the reader group like everybody else is. But let's see if he has access to view the access keys, which we created that custom role for our engineering group. And no, we don't. Authorization failed because he's not in the engineering group, which has that custom role. So let's see if you can see the runbooks container. And no, he also doesn't have access to view this because he doesn't have access to the key to list the data. So although he has a reader access to view all resources, it doesn't mean that he can view protected resources like this container. All right, so we're going to log out of Bob's account here, and we're going to log back in as the admin. And, you know, say we're on the engineering team, like pretend we're Roy, and part of our job is to do password resets for our Azure AD users. And, you know, that's just become really cumbersome. We've had people just constantly forgetting their passwords, and just kind of one of those nuisances that interrupts our day as engineers. And it also is just kind of frustrating for the user. They can't get their work done. You know, Bob happened to forget his password recently, and he just wants to get in there and build his happy little clouds with his happy little trees. And so Bob forgets his password, but that's okay because we can enable a service called self-service password reset, which, you know, not only does that empower our users to be able to just reset their own passwords, but that takes a little bit of distraction off of the engineering group's plate so we can focus on more important things like building out our Terraform IAM as code here. So now that we're logged in as the admin, let's go back to our Azure AD Blade and over to password reset, which is right here. And we're just going to enable this on all of our users. Let's just let's just let everybody have that ability to go ahead and reset their passwords. And so what we can tell Bob is, hey, look, Bob, you know, you're we don't make mistakes, you know, just happy little accidents, right? And so Bob had that opportunity to make a happy little accident that benefited both the engineering group as well as all of our other users. So we've gone through the entire procedure here, except for one last step that I'd like to toss in at the end here, which is that section on importing existing Azure AD users into Terraform. So say you have been creating your Active Directory, your Azure Active Directory users in your Azure environment already, and you want to pull all of that data into Terraform. Let's flip back over to VS Code here. And one of the things you can do is run this little Python script that I created, which it's basically running an AD query to pull down a list of your users, outputting it into a TSV file, and filtering it based on the display name and the user principal name and the department of each of your users. And we can take a look at the output of this command real quick. So these are all of our users that exist out there right now. And it's going to pull all of that down. Python's going to read through the TSV file, and it's going to loop through all of those columns and assign variables to each of the names that we need. So like the display name, the principal name, and then the department. And it's going to output it in Terraform format, syntax and format for us. So we can just copy and paste that into our main.tf file. Or if you wanted to just like output this into like a brand new TF file to get going, like a users.tf file, you could certainly do that too. And this does require you to have your AZ login set up so it can run that AZ AD command, and you just run it like that. And here you go. You're ready to get going with your new Azure Identity and Access Management Terraform as code. You'll note that it doesn't, you know, obviously have the super secret password and to enforce the user to reset their password, force password change true value. Since these users already exist, we don't want to be, you know, messing with their accounts. That those fields aren't needed. But any new users you create, you want to add those values in there. All right, that about wraps it up for this demonstration of implementing Azure Active Directory and role-based access control using Terraform and a variety of other tools such as the Python scripts and Azure CLI and GitHub Actions workflows, and navigating through the Azure portal as well. Upon completion of the procedure, you'll now have a basic architecture started for implementing Azure Identity and Access Management as code. And, you know, I hope that you found this helpful, and any other feedback that you have, please drop it in the comments below. And thanks for watching.